So from an investment perspective, Temet benefits from a well-resourced local research footprint of over 70 investment professionals in 18 offices across 13 countries. That very much gives us the resources to cover the breadth and depth of this interesting and growing asset class.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. Joining me in the studio today is Sri Chandran. He's Vice President, Senior Product Specialist at Franklin Templeton, and we're discussing the Templeton Emerging Markets Investment Trust. Sri, welcome. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So maybe start by telling us what Temet is and its objectives.
Sure. Temet is short for Templeton Emerging Markets Investment Trust. It is the UK's oldest and largest investment trust, investing in stocks across global emerging markets. The objective is to provide long-term capital appreciation by investing in this exciting asset class.
Why emerging markets?
Great question. For two reasons, broadly speaking. Firstly, from a growth perspective, emerging markets economic or GDP growth is forecasted to outpace developed markets. And this is driven by things like demographic and consumption tailwinds. But what's also interesting is that if you look at the quality of the asset class, this is not the asset class of the past. In fact, if you compare the asset class today compared to, say, 15 years back, you can see a market improvement towards more innovative businesses. Take, for example, technology businesses that are very much architects of the fourth industrial revolution we're all living through today. Another way to look at quality is in terms of policy making. If you look at the debt levels across emerging markets, they are lower on aggregate compared to, say, developed markets, whose debt levels have in fact risen higher. And thirdly, from a quality perspective, if you look at corporate governance, we are seeing tailwinds there as well. In the portfolio of Temet, for instance, we have quite a few Chinese technology companies that are returning significant cash back to shareholders. And also, if you look at it from a market perspective, the likes of South Korea, for instance, have introduced things like the Value Up initiative to improve corporate governance in that market.
Take us through Temet's investment strategy, Sri.
So Temet employs a bottom-up stock picking approach through a very research-driven and actively managed strategy. The types of companies our team are effectively looking for are businesses that can sustain their earnings power into the future and buying them at a discount today. So the result essentially is a core emerging market equity portfolio of around about 80 stocks, which very much reflects our best ideas through this selective approach we employ.
How about investment opportunities? What types of investment opportunities are you seeing?
So we believe emerging markets are home to globally relevant businesses. And what I mean by that is twofold. Firstly, there are businesses that are benefiting from rising domestic consumption. So if you think about offline or online consumption firms, a good example is a South Korean business called Naver that we hold in the Temet portfolio, which is very much, you can think of it as the Google or Amazon of South Korea. Banks is another beneficiary of this rising domestic consumption tailwind. So in Temet's portfolio, we hold a selection of Asian and Latin American banks. A good example is ICICI Bank in India, which is the leading private sector bank that is a high conviction holding in Temet's portfolio. The second way to look at it is the asset class is home to businesses that are powering the global economy. And what I mean by that is that it's not an esoteric asset class anymore. These are businesses that are affecting all our lives, even here in the developed world. Take, for instance, some of the technology businesses in emerging markets. They are very much enablers of the digital revolution, supplying things like hardware, software, and even semiconductor solutions. TSMC is a high conviction holding that we have in Temet, which is effectively a Taiwanese business and the world's leading advanced semiconductor foundry. Another example is SK Hynix, which is another Temet holding. It's very much a South Korean business that has a leading position in supplying AI relevant memory chips, so very much benefiting from that AI type of news that we see every day.
How about today's climate? So put maybe emerging markets into the context of the geopolitical and economic climate of today.
Well, what's interesting is that despite this being an asset class that is fundamentally stronger, we believe, compared to say 10, 15 years back. It's also significantly undervalued compared to developed markets. So if you look at the valuation levels of emerging markets compared to developed markets, they're trading at around about historic lows. And we think that's unjustified, not just because it's a completely different asset class in many ways, but also because you get access to globally relevant businesses, as we talked about. And also, let's not forget, many developed market companies rely on emerging markets for their growth. So by investing in emerging markets today, you're almost gaining or diversifying your equity exposure, we think, at a discount to globally relevant businesses. And let's not forget, if you look at the decade or so that was in the lead up to 2010, this was a time when emerging markets were actually outperforming developed markets. And if you look at year-to-date performance, for instance, as of the end of May, you'll see emerging markets have actually outperformed developed markets. So in some ways, we may be at the start or well into the next emerging markets bull run, we think.
So if we are going into that emerging markets bull run, what sort of differentiators or advantages does Temet have?
So from an investment perspective, Temet benefits from a well-resourced local research footprint of over 70 investment professionals in 18 offices across 13 countries. That very much gives us the resources to cover the breadth and depth of this interesting and growing asset class. Temet also benefits from a highly experienced portfolio management team. My colleagues Chetan Segal and Andrew Ness manage Temet. Each of them have over 30 years of experience in the industry. And in fact, they were also awarded the AAA rating by Citivire most recently. Thirdly, from a portfolio perspective, with that selective high conviction approach we employ, we are quite different to a benchmark. And also, if you look at the holdings within Temet, quite a few of the holdings are significantly different compared to both the benchmark and other active managers. Finally, everyone's favorite question, performance. Temet has demonstrated strong historic performance consistency. So if you look at it on a near-term, 1 year, 3 year, or longer-term, 5 year, 10 year basis, we've outperformed the index on a NAV basis as of the end of May. But how we also like to look at it is in terms of performing versus the index on a rolling 5-year basis. And on that front, we've outperformed over 85% of the time over the last 10 years. Finally, if you look at the inception date of Temet all the way back to 1989, over that sort of 36-year period, it generated around about 2.8% annualized alpha, again on a NAV basis versus the index. So strong performance coming through from our active investment approach. And then finally, to end on the actual vehicle that Temet is in, as you know, it's an investment trust. As I mentioned at the start, Temet is the largest investment trust in the global emerging market space in the UK. That gives investors the liquidity they might be seeking. Secondly, from a discount perspective, the asset class is at a discount to developed markets. But also what's interesting is that Temet's portfolio is trading at a slight discount to the index. And in addition, being an investment trust structure, the actual market price of Temet is trading at a discount to its NAV. So if you like a bargain, there's almost a triple discount currently at play here. And finally, Temet benefits from the governance of an independent and highly capable board who oversee things like share buybacks and dividend payments. In fact, Temet has also been awarded income and growth awards from Kepler. And so for investors who are seeking things like dividends, this might also be a good option to look at.
Well, it sounds like a great option, a great investment proposition. Thank you very much for coming in and introducing it to us.
Thank you. My pleasure, Stephen.
Sri Chandran, he's Vice President, Senior Product Specialist at Franklin Templeton.